on purpose, even if you haven't eaten a bite since dinner. That's not a malfunction. It's called hepatic glucose output, and it's been keeping humans alive through the night for as long as we've had livers. But after 50, especially if your metabolism has started to lose some of its flexibility, that overnight sugar release doesn't always get handled the way it used to. And here's the part almost nobody explains to you at a checkup. What you eat in the hour before you turn off the light can be the difference between waking up with a steady, calm fasting number or waking up to a blood sugar reading that makes no sense to you because you didn't even eat that much. I need you to really hear that because most of the fear around bedtime snacking is aimed in the wrong direction. You've probably been told the safest bedtime snack is no snack at all. For some people, that's true. For a lot of people over 50, it's actually the opposite of true. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why, and which foods do the opposite of spiking you while you sleep. Stay with me all the way to the last one, because it isn't really what most people picture when they hear the word snack at all. And it comes with one caution I want you to hear before you try it, not after. My name is Dr. Lim. I'm a physician, internal medicine is my clinical home, but for more than 15 years my real obsession has been nutritional biochemistry, the science of what food actually does to the human body at the molecular level, hour by hour, not just calorie by calorie. I did not come to this channel to sell you anything. I'm not here to push a supplement, a powder, or a 12-week course. I'm here because the research on this exists, it's published, it's free to read if you know where to look, and somehow it almost never makes it to the dinner table, or in this case, the nightstand. So let's talk about what's actually happening in your body overnight, because once you understand the mechanism, the whole list that's coming will make sense instantly, instead of feeling like a set of random rules. Picture your liver as a warehouse that never fully closes. All day, when you eat, it stores extra glucose as a kind of starch called glycogen. All night, while you sleep, it slowly releases that glycogen back out as glucose. To keep your brain fed, your brain runs almost entirely on glucose, even at 3 in the morning, even while you're dreaming. In a young, metabolically flexible body, insulin quietly manages that overnight release so your blood sugar barely moves. But as we get older, two things commonly shift. First, many of us develop some degree of insulin resistance. Our cells respond a little more sluggishly to insulin's signal, so more sugar lingers in the blood longer before it's cleared. Second, there's a well-documented pattern called the dawn phenomenon, where hormones like cortisol and growth hormone, which are supposed to help you wake up and get moving, trigger the liver to release extra glucose in the early morning hours, on top of what it's already doing. For someone with normal insulin sensitivity, that's a minor blip. For someone whose insulin response has slowed down with age, that blip can turn into the fasting glucose number that makes your doctor raise an eyebrow. Here's the piece that changes everything. What's in your stomach when all of this starts matters. Go to bed on an empty stomach after a carb-heavy dinner hours earlier, and your liver has nothing to buffer against. It just floods the system on its own schedule. Go to bed having eaten the wrong thing right before sleep, something that spikes glucose fast and then crashes it, and you can actually provoke a bigger overnight swing because a crash triggers stress hormones that push the liver to release even more sugar to compensate. But go to bed with a small, well-chosen combination of protein, fiber, and the right kind of fat in your stomach, and you do something remarkable. You slow the rate at which anything reaches your bloodstream. You blunt the liver's overreaction, and you give your body a steadier, flatter overnight curve instead of a spike and crash roller coaster. That's the one idea I want you to carry through this entire video, because every single food on this list earns its place because of it. It's not about eating less before bed. It's about eating in a way that slows the release. Keep 3 words in your head as we go. Gastric emptying, the speed food leaves your stomach and enters your bloodstream. Glycemic response, how sharply a food raises your blood sugar. And satiety, whether what you eat actually keeps you full enough that you're not up at 2 a.m. raiding the pantry for something worse. You'll see at least one of these, usually 2, in every food I'm about to walk you through. And I'll be honest with you about something else before we start, because it matters to how you use this information. In my training, and in Korea's own long tradition of what's called yaksik dongwon, food and medicine share the same root. There's a deep instinct toward balance rather than restriction, toward what you can add to a meal rather than only what you should cut. You're going to hear that instinct show up a few times tonight, because some of it is genuinely useful here. But I want to say something plainly, right at the start, so you trust everything that comes after it. Traditional does not automatically mean safe, and Korean does not automatically mean healthier. Some of Korea's most iconic fermented foods carry real sodium loads that matter enormously for blood pressure and kidney health. I'll say exactly where that applies tonight and where it doesn't. I'm not romanticizing anything. I'm giving you the mechanism, wherever it comes from. Number 7, the food that opens this list is something most people think of as a treat, not a blood sugar tool. A small handful of raw walnuts. About 14 halves, roughly an ounce, or 28 grams. Here's why this earns a spot on a video about blood sugar, when most people associate nuts with weight, not glucose. Walnuts are almost entirely fat, fiber, and a modest amount of plant protein, with essentially zero starch. That combination physically slows gastric emptying, remember that word from a moment ago, which means whatever else is in your stomach, including any residual carbohydrate from dinner, gets released into your bloodstream more gradually instead of all at once. Research published in the journal Diabetes Care, looking at nut consumption and glycemic control in people with type 2 diabetes, found that regular nut intake was associated with meaningful improvements in fasting glucose and HbA1c over time. Not a cure, not an overnight fix, but a real measurable association worth paying attention to. Walnuts, specifically, also carry a notable amount of magnesium, a mineral that's directly involved in how your cells respond to insulin. Population studies consistently link higher magnesium intake with better insulin sensitivity. Though I want to be precise with you, that's an association from observational research, not a guarantee for any one person. So what should you do tonight? A small handful, unsalted, on its own, or alongside something from later on this list? Not the honey-roasted kind, not the whole can. A handful, not a bowl. Number 6 is the one almost every dietitian will tell you, but almost nobody tells you why it specifically matters at bedtime. Plain, unsweetened Greek yogurt. Here's the why is this even here moment. Yogurt has a reputation as a breakfast food or a diet food, not as a nighttime blood sugar tool. But plain Greek yogurt is dense in casein, a slow-digesting milk protein that can take hours to fully break down and enter your bloodstream as amino acids. That slow, steady protein release does two things overnight. It helps blunt the liver's early morning glucose surge I described earlier, and it keeps you satiated through the night so you're less likely to wake up genuinely hungry. There's also a gut angle worth naming, because it connects back to something Korean food tradition has leaned on for centuries without necessarily calling it this: live bacterial cultures. A growing body of research is linking a healthier, more diverse gut microbiome to better overnight glucose regulation. The National Institutes of Health has funded substantial work in this area. Though I'll be straightforward with you, this field is still young, and we're talking about association, not a proven causal fix. What I can tell you with confidence is the protein mechanism, which stands on its own. The action tonight: choose plain, unsweetened Greek yogurt. A half cup is plenty, and skip the flavored cups, which are often closer to dessert than to a blood sugar tool, sometimes carrying 15 or more grams of added sugar in a single small container. Number 5, and this is where I want you to lean in a little because it surprises almost everyone. 2 kiwi fruits. Fruit, at bedtime, on a blood sugar list. I know how that sounds, but kiwi has one of the lower glycemic indexes of any fruit you'll find in a Western grocery store, generally estimated in the low to mid-50s, and it's unusually high in fiber for its size, at roughly 2 to 3 grams per fruit. That fiber forms a kind of gel in your digestive tract that physically traps sugar molecules and slows their absorption, the fiber mechanism I mentioned earlier in action. There's also a smaller, genuinely interesting body of research out of Taiwan, published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition, that looked at kiwi consumption before bed and sleep quality in adults with sleep complaints. The study was small, and I want to be honest that it wasn't primarily a blood sugar study, so I'm not going to oversell it to you as proven glucose science. What it does add credibly is this: better sleep itself is independently linked to better next-day insulin sensitivity. So a food that may support sleep and carries a naturally low glycemic load earns a legitimate place here, even if the sleep mechanism specifically needs more research before I'd call it settled. The action: 2 kiwis, skin on if you tolerate it, which adds even more fiber, about 20 to 30 minutes before you turn in. Now, before we go further, the 2 items I have left after this next one are the ones that surprise people the most, including some of my own patients who were certain they already knew this topic cold. Number 4, which is coming up right after this, is one that most health-conscious viewers assume is only about protein and has almost nothing to do with blood sugar. They're wrong, and I want you to see why. If you're finding this useful, this is exactly the kind of thing I dig into every week. Real, sourced information about aging well after 50, no fear-mongering, no supplements to sell, so consider subscribing before we keep going. Number 4, a soft-boiled or hard-boiled egg. 1, maybe 2. Here's the surprise. Eggs contain essentially zero carbohydrate, so on paper they shouldn't need to be on a won't spike your blood sugar list at all. Of course they won't spike you. There's nothing in them to spike with. But that's exactly the point people miss. The value of an egg at bedtime isn't what it lacks, it's what it replaces. An egg delivers roughly 6 grams of high-quality, complete protein with almost no calories from carbohydrate, which means if hunger before bed is what's driving you toward crackers, cereal, or toast, all of which will spike you and then crash you, triggering that stress hormone rebound I described earlier, the egg satisfies that hunger signal without ever putting glucose into the equation. Research on protein and satiety, including work published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, consistently shows that protein-forward foods produce stronger, longer-lasting fullness signals per calorie than carbohydrate-forward foods do. So, what should you do? If you're someone who genuinely gets hungry before bed, a single boiled egg, prepared earlier in the day and kept in the fridge, is one of the simplest tools in this entire list. No cooking required at 11 at night. Number 3, and this is the one I promised you, the one people are most confident they've already got figured out, and the one where that confidence is actually the risky part. Cottage cheese, ideally with a light dusting of cinnamon on top. Cottage cheese, like Greek yogurt, is loaded with slow-digesting casein protein, so you get that same overnight satiety and glucose blunting effect I described a few minutes ago. But the reason this lands at number 3 instead of alongside the yogurt is the cinnamon. Here I want to be very careful with you because this is an area where I've seen other health content wildly overstate the evidence, and I refuse to do that to you. There is a real, published body of research, including trials referenced in journals like Diabetes Care, looking at cinnamon and insulin sensitivity, and some trials do show a modest improvement in fasting glucose with regular cinnamon intake. But the overall evidence is genuinely mixed. Several well-designed studies show little to no effect, and the size of benefit varies enormously between trials, likely because cinnamon, in different studies, isn't even always the same compound in the same dose. So here is exactly what I can honestly tell you. Cinnamon is not a proven blood sugar medication, and it never will replace one. What it is, credibly, is a low-risk, low-cost addition with some genuine supporting research behind it, sitting on top of a food cottage cheese, whose protein-based mechanism is much better established on its own. The action tonight: a half cup of low-sodium cottage cheese, a light dusting of cinnamon, nothing else needed. Number 2, and I want you to notice something about this one before I even tell you what it is. It's the first item on this entire list that isn't an animal product, and it's the one my own patients are most shocked to learn belongs here. Edamame. Young, steamed soybeans, still in the pod or shelled, about a half cup. Here's the why is this even here moment. Most people file soy under vegetarian protein and stop thinking about it, but edamame combines complete plant protein, roughly 8 grams per half cup, with close to 4 grams of fiber in that same small serving. That's the protein plus fiber combination working together, both mechanisms I asked you to hold on to at the start, stacked in a single food. There's also research specific to soy isoflavones and glycemic control. Studies published in journals including the Journal of Nutrition have found associations between regular soy protein intake and improved fasting glucose and insulin sensitivity markers in some populations, particularly in trials involving postmenopausal women, which matters directly to a lot of you watching this. I want to be precise though. This evidence is stronger in some population groups than others, and soy research overall still has real debate around it, especially regarding long-term hormonal effects in different groups. That's a separate conversation from tonight's topic, and if it applies to you, it's worth a direct question to your own physician. For blood sugar specifically, the fiber and protein mechanism is solid on its own, independent of any isoflavone debate. The action: a half cup of steamed, lightly salted edamame, and if you can find it low sodium or unsalted, better still, especially if blood pressure is already something you're watching. And now, the one I asked you to wait for. Because this last one isn't really a snack in the way you're picturing a snack. It's a habit, a small pour, not a plate. And it comes out of a tradition Korean cooks have leaned on for generations without ever framing it in terms of blood sugar science. Vinegar, specifically a small amount of diluted vinegar, a tablespoon in a glass of water, or closer to how it's traditionally used, a spoonful of rice vinegar dressing on a small side of vegetables, the way it appears in Korean muchim, those vinegar-dressed banchan you'll see on almost any traditional table. Here's why this earns the top spot. And it's not sentiment, it's one of the more consistently replicated findings in this entire field. Research led by Swedish researcher Ellen Ostman and colleagues, and echoed in multiple follow-up studies, found that vinegar consumed alongside a meal measurably blunts the blood sugar response to that meal. And critically, some of that same research documented something called the second meal effect, where vinegar taken with an evening meal was associated with improved glucose control the following morning, meaning the benefit didn't just apply to the meal it was eaten with, it carried forward into the next morning's numbers. The proposed mechanism is that acetic acid, vinegar's main active compound, appears to slow the rate at which starch is broken down and absorbed in the small intestine. Again, that gastric emptying glycemic response mechanism showing up one more time, in maybe its purest form on this entire list. Now, I promised you a caution before you tried this, not after, and here it is plainly. Undiluted vinegar taken straight is hard on tooth enamel over time, and it can aggravate acid reflux or an already irritated esophagus in some people. If you deal with GERD, this one may not be for you at all, or only in the food-based muchum form rather than as a drink. Always dilute it if you're drinking it, and if you're on any medication that affects blood sugar directly, this is exactly the kind of small daily addition worth mentioning to your doctor, simply so everything you're doing is accounted for on the same page. And here's the honesty I promised you at the very top of this video. This is also a moment where I won't hand you a false contrast between Korean and Western. A spoon of rice vinegar on vegetables is a lovely low-risk habit with real research behind its mechanism. It is not safer because it's traditional. It's useful because of the acetic acid, full stop. The same chemistry works whether it's on a Korean banchan or an Italian salad. Let me tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call her Grace, because that isn't her name, and the details I'm giving you are a composite, not any one real person's chart. Grace was 66, recently told her fasting glucose numbers had crept into pre-diabetic range, and genuinely frightened by it. Frightened enough that her first instinct was to simply stop eating after 6 in the evening, every single night, no exceptions. Within a few weeks, she was waking up at 2 a.m. hungry, irritable, and, this is the part that surprised her, her fasting glucose numbers weren't actually improving the way she expected. When we talked it through, what was happening made sense with everything I've explained tonight. An empty stomach for 12-13 hours overnight was leaving her liver's glucose release completely unbuffered, and some nights the hunger itself was triggering the stress hormone rebound that pushes glucose even higher toward morning. We didn't add a medication, we added a small bedtime routine. a half cup of plain yogurt some nights, a boiled egg, and a handful of walnuts on others, and she started keeping a small dish of vinegar-dressed cucumber in the fridge, a habit she remembered from her mother's kitchen. 3 months later, her fasting numbers had come down meaningfully, and what she told me at that appointment has stayed with me. It felt like something she was adding to take care of herself, not one more thing being taken away from her. That's the sentence I want you to remember from this entire video, because it's the whole thesis in one line. A good bedtime snack after 50 isn't about eating less, it's about eating smarter while you sleep. So here's how you actually use everything I've just told you, starting tonight without overthinking it. Build what I call a bedtime bowl. It takes 90 seconds. A few spoonfuls of plain Greek yogurt or cottage cheese as your protein base, a small handful of walnuts on top for the healthy fat that slows everything down, and either a couple of kiwi slices or a small side of vinegar-dressed vegetables alongside it, depending on what you have on hand. That's it. That's protein, fiber, and healthy fat, working together through the exact 3 mechanisms I asked you to hold on to at the start of this video, in one small bowl, ready in under 2 minutes, with nothing exotic required. Now, a few honest caveats, because general guidance is never the same thing as guidance built for your specific body, and I'd rather you hear this from me than learn it the hard way. Everything in this video is written for someone managing everyday garden variety insulin resistance or prediabetes. It is not written for advanced kidney disease, for anyone on dialysis, or for anyone managing type 1 diabetes with insulin dosing, all of which require far more individualized guidance than any video can responsibly give. If you take insulin or a medication like a sulfonylurea that can drop your blood sugar too low, please don't use anything in this video as a reason to skip a bedtime snack your doctor has specifically prescribed to prevent nighttime hypoglycemia. That snack is protecting you, and nothing here should ever be heard as permission to cut it. If you're on blood thinners, this particular list doesn't raise the vitamin K concerns that leafy greens sometimes do, but it's always worth mentioning any new regular habit, including something as small as a nightly spoonful of vinegar, to whoever manages your medications. And if you haven't had a fasting glucose or an HbA1c test in the last year, that is one of the simplest, most useful numbers you can ask your doctor for at your very next visit. You genuinely cannot make good choices for your own blood sugar without knowing where it actually stands right now. Let's bring it all together. Number 7 was a small handful of raw walnuts, for their fat and magnesium slowing everything down. Number 6 was plain Greek yogurt for its slow digesting protein and its gut health angle. Number 5 was 2 kiwi fruits, for their naturally low glycemic index and their fiber. Number 4 was a simple boiled egg, valuable for what it replaces as much as what it contains. Number 3 was cottage cheese with a light dusting of cinnamon, protein doing the heavy lifting with cinnamon as a modest, honest bonus. Number 2 was a half cup of edamame, plant protein and fiber stacked together. And number 1, the one worth remembering above all the others, was a small habit of vinegar, in water, or as a traditional vinegar-dressed side, for its uniquely well-documented effect on next morning glucose. If you're only going to start with a couple of these tonight, start with the yogurt or cottage cheese and the walnuts. They're the 2 easiest to have on hand with 0 preparation, and together they cover both the protein and the fat side of the mechanism I explained at the beginning. Everything else you can add in as it becomes convenient. I want to leave you with something before you go, because I think about this more than almost anything else in my work. The research behind everything in this video is published. It's peer-reviewed. Much of it is free to read on a government website tonight if you wanted to look it up yourself. And somehow it almost never makes it to an actual kitchen table. Not to the parent eating alone after the kids have grown and moved out. Not to the person who reheats the same thing every night because cooking for one feels like too much effort to bother with. Not even to the meal prepper who's certain, genuinely certain, that they've already got this figured out. That gap between what science knows and what actually reaches your plate is the entire reason this channel exists. A good bedtime snack after 50 isn't about eating less. It's about eating smarter while you sleep, and now you know exactly why. Tell me which of these 7 surprised you the most. I read every single comment, and I mean that literally. And tell me which 2 or 3 you're actually going to try tonight. I'd genuinely like to know. If this kind of real sourced information about aging well is useful to you, subscribe, because I'm here every week doing exactly this. No fear, no supplements, just the research and what it actually means for your body. Next week, I'm looking at 5 everyday drinks that are quietly raising your blood pressure, and at least one of them, almost everyone assumes, is completely harmless. I'll see you then.